Hello, everyone. I hope you're all doing well and welcome to the Franchise Show. This is the show, and I'm going to do it where we get under the hat of all things franchising. So it is a live show. Well, it's live if it's June the 10th at about 5:15 for around 50 minutes or thereabouts. And what do we do each week? So each week we take a new topic and we take some lovely guests. And this week is no exception to that. We have some lovely guests and we have a lovely topic. So this week, the topic is who buys a franchise and how do we go about selling a franchise and everything in between. And we have two wonderful people to talk about that from our friends at Businesses for Sale. We have the lovely Andrew Marcoux, and we also have Celine Anwar with us. So Salim, Andrew, welcome to the Franchise Show.
Thanks for having us. I'd say Salim's lovely too.
No, oh, is he? Yeah.
Yeah.
I
can vouch for that. Yes. I can vouch for his loveliness.
Thank you, guys.
Both lovely. Yes, absolutely. Anyway, both of you, welcome to the show. I thought perhaps we could start off with a little introduction, because even though most people know both of you and what it is that you do, there are going to be a few new people here, and there will be some new people that watch this in the future. So let's start off with a little introduction from both of you as to what you do, and we'll start with Salim.
Yep, no worries at all. Well, look, Harvey, thanks for having us. Long-time fan, first-time appearer, I guess. But it's lovely to see some familiar names in the chat too. So my name's Salim, as you can probably see by the tag underneath my face. I've been with businessesforsale.com for coming on 13 years. Actually, it's 12 and a half years last week. My baptism into Businesses for Sale was through the franchising side of the business. I started here as a sales executive, and I'm kind of right now I'm the COO of the business. I've got some really good mentors here. One's on screen right now, who've helped me along the way. I mean, my goal throughout my career, I guess, has been sort of fixing problems. I think BFS has really given that opportunity to fix not so much fix problems, but help people find solutions to their problems. I guess what we do at businessesforsale.com is we do connect people. We are connectors of in this case, buyers and sellers of franchises. The gap that we fill is we bring people who want to get into business for themselves into the world of franchising, and let them talk to some wonderful franchisors, see how they get on. It's a bit of a dating agency type experience, but every month we managed to bring just over 1.2 million buyers to the site. A good chunk of those people are looking for non-franchise businesses, but a very good chunk, about 30-40% of them, would consider buying a franchise as well. So what that's given us is a lot of interaction with me personally, a lot of interaction with buyers as well as franchisors. So I'm hoping to share some of that knowledge today.
Oh, fantastic. And that's a great introduction, and thank you for that. And Andrew, same thing to you as well. Again, most people know you, and obviously, this is your business. So perhaps give us a little bit of that background.
Well, I'm founder, CEO. I've been with the business since it was founded in the 90s, which seems a very long time ago now. Anything related to the 90s, and it is. I was quite young and quite wet behind the ears when I started in business, but you got to start at some point and you got to jump in 2 feet first. And we did start as a marketplace, as Salim alluded to, online classifiers, focused predominantly with going concern businesses for sale, very much high street, or in the States, Main Street type businesses, bricks and mortar type businesses in retail. And we kind of added franchise opportunities to the eyeballs from buyers of going concern non-franchise businesses relatively at early doors. So we realized that we had a relevant audience. And as Salim says, 1.2 million visits per month now. So we have quite a broad church of types of eyeballs, as you can imagine, from 1.2 million buyers of businesses, and you could put franchises in the wider category of a business, because I believe it is a valid and true route to entrepreneurship and business ownership. I don't think it was always the case back in the day. I think there was a sense of snobbery about franchise ownership, but I think that's completely changed, and it is seen as a very credible route to business ownership and the benefits of business ownership, predominantly cash flow, controlling your own destiny, and there's lots of benefits besides, and I think people have cottoned onto that as to why owning a franchise has its merits and benefits, not least, the mitigation of risk. Someone else has done that product market fit. That a startup or even buying an existing business, there may be risk associated with that. You're leveraging, you're standing on the shoulders of someone else and their investment, their capex that's gone into building a system, a brand, and a proven business model. So yeah, it's been really exciting for us down the years, and may I say even decades now, as we enter as we're knocking on the door of the 2030s. We're closer to 2030 there now than we are to 2020, which
oh goodness,
it's
don't say that, don't say
I know, but you got to have a sense check with seeing the great arc of life and time, seeing where you are on that journey. But yeah, and you know what I always feel as well, and it's an important tenet to have in business ownership, we're only just getting started, because the opportunity, the problems that we need to solve as a business, which Salim was mentioning, they are changing all the time. The world is changing all the time. The world of information and how people reach out to find information and digest that information and understand that information, whether they're discovering whether to buy a business or to buy a franchise, etc. That's changing all the time. And obviously the advent of AI is a huge kind of disruptor in how we used to do things versus to how we do things now. So, interesting
absolutely.
times.
Absolutely. I mean, my goodness, the number you quoted there, 1.2 million visits as well. That's a heck of a number. I mean, that's not something to say lightly. I mean, I know this from experience. It's not about the number, it's about the quality. But I also know that from experience that, I know your business has that. But that's an incredible number to reach, an incredible resource. Now, how do you think that sort of built up over the time to sort of reach that quality and quantity?
Yeah, I think it's in part knocking around long enough, right? We were one of the first marketplaces. We launched in the mid-90s when the internet bubble hadn't even taken off, even in the States at the time. In fact, when we launched BFS back in the day, we were predominantly an American site, because it was only really American users who were the early adopters, who had free local phone calls that they could power their modems through and have access to the internet by, were the only people surfing the internet at the time. And indeed it was where we had to go, and eventually obviously the rest of the world woke up to it in the dot-com bubble days of the late 90s, early 2000s, and then things have just changed time and time again. So knocking around, getting that domain authority and brand authority because of being around long enough, and finessing the product, and we've had time to try and get the product right, that product market fit, which all businesses need to do. But like I say, the landscape is changing all the time, and the way we interact with information is changing. So, successful businesses who want to remain successful need to change with it, and that's the challenge and the opportunity right now.
Yeah, absolutely.
Just to add on onto that a little bit, I think on the day-to-day basis, just as an observation, to put myself as a bit of as an external to BFS for a second, what I found is that our focus has been on quality over quantity, and for the volume of listings and the traffic that we get, we could another sort of player could triple that number, but I guess the focus has to be on what the user is actually after. And I think what our team is doing very good at doing is looking at what the user needs, and ultimately it's not leads, it's buyers that they need. You can get quote unquote leads anywhere. Define a lead. Every platform has its own definition. But what we were looking at was, because we come from people who from the angle of business acquisition, it takes one buyer of a business usually to buy a business, and you don't really need more than that. So why don't we drill into what makes that buyer a buyer rather than a lead? And that's been years in the making, and it started well before my time here. But the end result is that we get those 1.2 million buyers, but we get a very effective audience coming through. People who want to talk, who can have a conversation and can transact. I'm sure there may be some ambassadors and proofs of concept in this room.
It's really interesting to sort of hear about that, because, like you say, it's not leads that. We've got various different perspectives to talk about this from. So we're talking about it at the moment about who buys a franchise. But if you are a prospective investor and you're looking to buy into a franchise, this should be interesting to you as well, because you're the person who's going to invest in it. But also, of course, the businesses that are trying to find new partners that are aligned with what it is that they do, their values, then it's really important that they find the right people. And you've absolutely, I can't agree more when you say that it's buyers, it's people who are aligned with the business, not just a lead. You take a person that's got a kind of a mild interest in something, that's not really a lead. That's, but if you've got somebody who understands what the business is, is interested and aligns, that's somebody you can have a really genuine conversation with, and they feel their time isn't being wasted.
Yeah, and I think it's a broad church, because the access to capital is so broad in terms of somebody who may only have, small 5-figure number versus somebody who can have 6 figures and maybe even 7 figures to allocate capital to an investment opportunity. So there's a lot of subjectivity on understanding that buyer. And we are, I still like to think, relatively early in our journey of really getting to know the buyer, so much so that one-to-one match, because ultimately it only takes one buyer, good quality buyer, to buy the right franchise, right? Or to buy the right business. And it's our job to ensure that the mechanisms and the systems, the application itself, elicits the right information from the right buyer in the right way. That's the challenge. Take into account UX, UI, and all the usability concerns that we as web publishers have to encounter day to day, which is, not for the faint-hearted. And it's a very mature industry now and very sophisticated. We're all very adept to using the internet and apps to get things done. So how do we do that for the purposes of eliciting the right buyer, understanding the right buyer, to make sure we connect them right? And we spend time and energy on that, and no less with surveys and the like that I think are worth referencing. That Salim recently undertook a survey with the marketing team, and some really interesting stats there that might be brought to bear.
Okay.
To give us a bit of an insight of exactly who the types of buyer are that are on BFS.
That's really interesting. Yeah, I mean, definitely tell us more about that, because today is all about who these buyers are.
Yeah.
When I interview franchisors, it's one of the questions I always ask, what type of people normally are interested in your franchise? And it always gives a very varied answer. It's quite a tricky one when you're trying to position and trying to attract the right type of buyer if you don't know who they are. But yeah, I mean, Salim, before you get into that, let's just say hello to a few people who have joined us live. We have obviously got the lovely Simon Wise. He's on the screen right now. It's good to have you with us, Simon. We have the fantastic Penny Hopkinson with us, one of our lovely supporters. She's put, hello, franchise friends. Apologies for my late arrival. Well, it's no problem. It's always good to have you here whenever you can make it. And of course, Penny, I must promote your book. Your QR code is on the screen. And is the book The Right Way Round today? No, it's not. But if you want to get your ops manual the right way round, then do talk to Penny. That's my favourite advert I'm doing there. so it's very good. Anyway, great to have you with us, Penny. We also have the lovely Lisa with us, Lisa Feverick. She's put, hi everyone. Well, great to have you with us. We've got a few questions coming up, but I think it would be a great way to start, Salim, if you could tell us about this survey. Let us know what that was all about and what sort of questions, what you discovered.
So, I've got to give credit to the people that did this. So it was the marketing team who pulled this together. It's something that we do every year in partnership with the franchise exhibitions, and it's become a bit of a stalwart of sort of seeing what's out there from our side. It's a good way to get the feelers out, bring things in. This time around, we surveyed exactly 335 potential franchise investors. And I guess I'll go through the headlines of it because there's quite a lot of data that comes off of this. But what we found is the biggest group of franchise buyers or prospect franchise investors were between the ages of 25 and 34.
Oh, wow.
And then followed by, and the next largest cohort was between 45 and 54. Now, pre-pandemic, that number was, those numbers were tiny. We're talking each of those cohorts is roughly about a third of the respondents that we got. So what we found is the trend pre-COVID and post-COVID. Pre-COVID, a lot older, a lot more cash heavy, and maybe a bit more settled in the way that they want to enter into franchising. It's almost like a bit of a linear sort of progression from late stage career into business ownership through franchising. We do find that I guess basically what it's showing to us is that a younger demographic is looking for sustainable ways to control their future. Post-COVID, we have seen a lot more economic uncertainty. It doesn't seem to be a year without some sort of happening. Won't reference anything, but it makes people want to sort of build a bit more control into their lives, and business ownership is one of them, and franchising has proven itself to be a more credible route to business ownership. We also saw that roughly 35% of those people who are looking to invest in a franchise were in employment, and we're looking to either diversify their revenue streams, income streams, or replace employment completely, mostly the latter. And then we also found that 34% of the respondents were self-employed or running their own business. I think those people, between the two of them, obviously they have different motivations, but ultimately what they were coming at the let's just say the problem they were bringing to bear was an anxiety over their futures and needing something certain to fix it. I think that latter cohort makes a very interesting franchisee as well, as people who've already been in business ownership, already have that business savvy, kind of jump into a franchise system. If they can put up with the compliance and the systems, then they make excellent franchisees. We did also see that keeping it in the family, 12.5% of the respondents were already existing franchisees of a brand, if not usually typically a different brand. And therein you kind of see the segue between sort of unit and multi-unit franchising and potentially that transition, because you've built a successful business and now you might be under one brand and you may be looking for other brands to become multi-unit, multi-brand.
And that's quite a recent phenomenon in the last 5-10 years. I think the growth of the multi-unit, which kind of indicates what people are thinking about franchising in terms of allocation of capital as investors, in terms of how you scale and get a return on that investment, which I think is quite interesting. I mean, one thing that we didn't touch upon in the most recent survey, but I know we have in previous, is the gender balance. And what I think is quite gratifying to see is the redressing of an imbalance that I think traditionally franchising had, which was very male dominated, like something like 80-20 in the early mid 2000s, so like 2005 and before. And I know more recently surveys indicate it's almost 50-50, but I think it's still leaning towards a male bias in terms of gender equality, but I do think it indicates the kind of universality that franchising is starting to be embraced by everybody, which I think is a really, really key attribute. I mean, just leading on, I think one of the questions I can see it in the gutter there of questions that come in is the awareness of franchising. I mean, just looking at BFS over the years, we used to have a franchise section which was kind of tucked away on the main search on businessesforsale.com. It's now fully integrated into the search. Like franchises pretty much has parity with non-franchise businesses. So therein lies, I think the answer to that it has become more have a mass market appeal in terms of entrepreneurship and what it means to be in business ownership, and all the benefits that can be brought to bear because of that, as mentioned before, in terms of mitigation of risk, de-risking your return on that capital. I think we really need, as an industry, to keep shouting out about that, because business is not for the faint-hearted in any guise, in any shape, way, or form. Because it's a white rapid ride, right, and bare knuckle and the rest of it. No doubt about it.
Is. Yeah.
And possibly seat at the pants time and all the rest of it. So we as part of our mission is to try and espouse the value in franchising. Very important. And I think that it's a bit pull and push. I'm not saying that it's become more prevalent as a phenomenon because of BFS, but we're just a mirror ultimately of what the market wants. It's just classic supply and demand equation. So yeah, I think it's a great way into business ownership, and yeah, it is such a broad church. I mean, we have propensity to use words like cohort and put these things into buckets because you have to try and understand that spectrum of type of buyer. But when you're talking about capital, where you've got someone with single-digit thousands to take a risk on buying a franchise versus someone who potentially has access via investors and funds and the like, hundreds of thousands, if not millions, then you capture a whole load of people, don't you, in terms of what opportunities can be given as an asset class in terms of return on investment and the IRR and all these kind of financial technical terms that get involved when people are looking for a return on investment.
I mean, some fascinating stuff that's come out of asking these questions of people. I mean, one of the points I was going to pick up there, I mean, I've always been an advocate trying to get younger people into franchising because of it was kind of around 48, I think, the average the last time that I looked at some stats on it. But that's really refreshing to hear that, the biggest group were between 25 and 34. I think that's really, really positive to hear, because we need a younger generation of business owners, because, they want to be carrying on for, 10, 15, 20 years, and if you get some people that are in that age group, there's a good chance of that happening. Were you surprised by that number?
Yes, because I mean, just because the survey says that doesn't mean the actual the buyer who ends up buying the business ends up being that age, by the way, because and I think there's an aspirational aspect. And again, I think entrepreneurship itself has changed. The idea of being entrepreneur has become a lot more mass market, partly because of social media and the buzz that social media and wealth generation and a route to wealth. People do want to be wealthy, and they do want to be in control of their own destiny. And buying a business, buying a franchise is an alternate route, valid and verified and proven routes to starting a business, which was traditionally the kind of mainstay idea, right, in terms of getting into business. I'll start a business. But of course, if someone else has done it and done the hard work in the first instance, and people are aware of the fact that there's a way of getting into business, and of course it stands to reason people will jump in 2 feet first and really embrace that idea, and that snobbery that franchising may have had kind of starts to go away. And I think it has gone away, and if anything, it's actually become a kind of a no-brainer way of getting into business. What you need to do, of course, as a prospective franchisee is do the right due diligence, as you would do with any investment. And you would do with spending any money that's going to have serious consequences on your life and where it's going to take your life. And that piece, in terms of the education piece, I think we as a business need to always be working hard at that in terms of the training and awareness, and indeed part mentoring, really, in terms of ensuring that people do take the right steps for that due diligence process. Talk to existing franchisees, not necessarily the franchisees that the franchisor may be referring to you, etc. Which is something I have had conversations with prospective franchisees all the time. And actually, what is it you want from a lifestyle of your franchise? And I think that flexibility and freedom that franchising gives you in being able to almost pick like off an a la carte menu, that prospective idea, it kind of systemizes the whole approach to entrepreneurship in a way that formalizes it, which I think people, if they're doing their due diligence right, kind of appeals to them.
Yes, I think you're absolutely right. I mean, you make a very, very good point about due diligence. I think it's very important, like you say, when you're looking at any business. It's important in franchising. It's important in franchising when you're in we don't have as many regulations here in the UK. It's obvious to point that out. We have organisations like the BFA. But if you're investing in a business, it is down to you to do some simple due diligence, and protect yourself, get different perspectives on things. I think it's really important to do that, to make sure it's right for you.
Yeah. Do you think it's lacking that we don't have a franchise discovery document kind of process like they do in the States? I think in Canada as well, the FDD, which is kind of sits at the heart of the discovery process. I mean, that is kind of the industry growing up and standardizing what it means to be getting involved with a given, and that is kind of regulatory in its shape and form. I don't know what you might think about that, Harvey, in terms of how franchises would wear that.
Yeah, I think it's a subject that we've debated here and we will continue to debate. And I think there's absolutely two sides of the argument. I don't think necessarily the regulation is going to solve any issues or challenges if they are there. But it's a great debate to have. And in fact, if you want to have that debate, we are going to be having that exact debate in about 3 weeks, I think, on this very show. So we are definitely going to be talking about it. But look, I think it's really interesting. We're talking. It was interesting to hear the different types of buyers that you're getting somebody who perhaps has a few thousand to invest, right up to somebody who is perhaps looking at multi-site with a big established brands, and you get a big range of people, really opening it up to different types of people, isn't it? What do you think about that, Salim?
I think it's all part of the success of success begets more success. Once you get the proof of concepts coming in, one mark of the success of the industry is the resales side of things. It's businesses are maturing, the industry is maturing, and so things are happening. The more mature conversations come off the back of that. In terms of the multi-unit side of things, it seems like a natural consequence of those franchisors who are businesses themselves, the franchise brands, getting to that level of maturity, proving the concept, and then attracting people who have. And there's quite a lot of cash out there, just in pockets, and it's not as easily democratized as say the franchise brands and units themselves are. I think just to my thoughts on multi-unit and how that fits into where things are at right now. I think it is a natural consequence of where we are as a world, as well as an industry. Access to capital. If you have capital, you have more avenues to more capital, basically. So you're going to work on that. And what we're seeing at the minute as a trend in the industry is that multi-unit franchising is doing very, very well, because of a number of factors there. Some of which I've just outlined there, but I guess it's really down to the success of an industry advocating for the same ends as a community. That's bringing people into that, bringing a higher level investors. Some people who are new to franchising, completely new to franchising, coming in and becoming multi-unit, multi-brand operators and investors. I think that's my general sort of slightly jumbled up take on things.
I love that. I mean, you mentioned at the beginning of that as well. You mentioned about resales as well. did you look, and what's your experience in people being interested in resell rather than, you know, a green site, you know, a brand new site? You know, is that something that's segregated out? Is that something that people have expressed an interest in?
Well, yeah, I mean, I would answer that by saying that, you know, the savvy buyer amongst our audience, our users, our clientele from the buy side, realize that, of course, a franchise reseller has already established credible, proven revenue from a historical point of view. So that itself de-risks even further against those other reasons why you might want to buy a franchise. Why? Because you're buying already a franchise that may already have a recurring user base, customer base that is buying from them from in a given territory. And, you know, if I was to have my time again as an entrepreneur, and it's not to say, you know, in the second chapter of my life of what I might end up doing, I think looking and finding franchise resales where the resales have to happen because of circumstance. There's a forced sale, because most of the time a good successful business is forced to sell, not willingly, because of circumstance. And it sometimes can be age, retirement, it can be tiredness, burnout, it can be divorce, it can be illness, all these kind of acts of God that can kind of swing in and precipitate something that otherwise would not happen. They're the sales to look out for. And I almost sometimes joke amongst BFS that we should have some sort of status of this sale is an unwilling sale of a business that's a very healthy business and will go very, very quickly. And I think there is a proportion of franchise resales that do fall into that category. I think probably a distinct minority of franchise resales, but the savvy buyer will move fast to pick that up. And it does relate to growth, it does relate to all the obvious things like recurring revenue as a proportion of the revenue mix that the resale is experiencing, growth, and market opportunity in terms of where things are moving, in terms of is there enduring cash flow in and around that franchise resale. So that might make potentially a franchise buyer quite agnostic to the type of business they're buying, beyond and above it just being about cash flow, right? And I do think cash flow is king in this regard for a certain type of investor, where it is and buyer of a franchise, where it's not about lifestyle, it's not about a life's mission because it's ecologically sensitive, or it's ticking various boxes for somebody to align their values in life. It's just about cold hard cash, because ultimately at one level all business is about that. So it's not to be sniffed at. And I know serial entrepreneurs who flip in and out of businesses quite quickly in and around growth opportunities and make a living from that idea, because it is about capital windfall, because you are growing that capital base, not just about the income, because you grow the multiple of that income, of that cash flow, and you get a better tax treatment on any windfall that you might receive on sale, which is still the case even despite Rachel Reeves' best efforts to knock down entrepreneurs tax relief, or BADR as it's called these days, and God knows what it'll be called next year. But yeah,
absolutely. No, I think that this subject about why people sell is very interesting. It's just as interesting as who buys or why they buy. Why someone is selling is very important to that new buyer coming in. And I think it's very interesting to for people to meet that person, to understand what's going on. Understand the numbers is one thing, but understand those reasonings as well. I do want to welcome the fact that we've got Joe Caruso with us. I'm going to put his comment up, but it's probably going to cover the entire screen. And I'm probably going to pick on an element of what Joe said here. Let's try and put it up and see. Okay, so it's all right. So it's not all coming up. But one of the things that I want, first of all, hi, Joe. Great to have you with us. Joe is from America, a great, passionate franchise expert. And please, everybody, connect with Joe. And you can find out all about what's happening there. You know, he's made a good point that some people come from, you know, there may be former executives, veterans, all of these different things. A couple of things I wanted to pick on is further down the comment. I won't read it all, but he's put here that franchisors need to clearly define what their value proposition is and what their ideal candidate profile is. I'd really like to sort of hear both your thoughts on this, because it must be really hard as a business that's trying to find people who are interested in these franchise businesses if those businesses themselves don't really understand what their value proposition is, or indeed who their franchise or candidate really is. Have you had any experience or challenges in that department?
I can jump on that if that's all right. Well, I think for a very long time, while I was account managing good folk like Coffee Republic as well, to be fair, this problem would come up pretty much daily. These questions would come up daily. I think the first takeaway from all of that experience was that transparency is key. People need to lay out the facts for people. And if you're struggling to sort of define your value proposition, think of it in these terms. The top 4 questions that a buyer tends to ask buyer, franchise investor, the unit multi-brand might ask is, well, first things first, what am I going to be doing? Second thing, what is it going to cost me? And then third thing, sorry, I beg pardon. Yeah, I got the order the wrong way around. What am I going to be doing? What am I going to make out of it? What have I got to invest? And has anybody else done it before me? And if you sort of cover those 4 things, it tends to answer sort of 90% of the initial questions. Because remember, what we're doing is we're presenting an initial sort of teaser of a franchise opportunity, of a business opportunity for somebody, and those bits of information can really help. And then when it comes to the next stage of things, where you need to look at capital, capability, and character, they sort of flow off of that. But the journey of 1,000 miles, and starts with a single step, right? So if you set out your value proposition as clearly as you can at this stage, talk about your successes, and if you're organizing your pitch, look at it in those. So what I mentioned earlier goes right at the top. And then sort of give a bit of a justification of give a bit of proof to somebody who's looking for it, and that might encourage them to read a bit further. That proof can be sort of testimonials from franchisees, or some sort of proof of concept that you can dig into that shows how successful the brand has been, the journey it's been on. The last thing that people want to hear is the life story of the brand. We started in 1985 and did this and this. That sort of comes at the bottom of their pecking order, and that comes in later into their consideration. So you can leave that towards the bottom of your advert. That's stuff that they may need to know, may not need to know. But really, quite often, again, as you said earlier on, sometimes less is more. So if you give them the information they need at this point, you can sort of qualify people in and out pretty easily. Let them do as little work as possible at that stage to get on to the next part of the conversation, but let them do quality work at the same time.
Yeah, absolutely. No, I completely agree on that. I mean, I'm picking up on something else that Joe's said, and he's responded to Simon's point here. And I like this, and I've heard this from Joe before, but he mentions 3 things here. And let's put up this one, because I think this one will fit on the screen. And I'm going to I'll read this first. Simon Wise, for multi-unit candidates, it's all more important to find the right ones who match the franchisor's profile in terms of, and this is the one I wanted to talk about, capital, capability, and he said before character. I think it's changed there. But look, I think that's something that I find really, there we go. Capital, capability, and character. What do you think about those 3 things?
Well, it's quite amorphic, isn't it, character?
Yeah,
it's you know, it's being human, and being human is frankly irrational and incalculable, which what makes us special and infuriating in probably equal measure, and probably why AI will never overtake us on the creativity front, which is an ongoing debate in the wider
Absolutely. But you've
wider
said
world.
it here today, Andrew. You've said it here
Yeah,
today.
yeah, it's
It's
obviously
going to be okay.
uppermost in my thoughts right now, but yeah, I think it's absolutely right. I think that's a very good way of finding that match. And the fact is, if it's a fuzzy match, because you're involving, capital's relatively straightforward. There is mathematical kind of scientific quantification in and around allocation of capital, and it's a very DCF valuation or IRR. There's kind of well-versed kind of mechanisms to calculate your ROI. In terms of capability, that's a little bit more human in terms of one's experience and how one's experience may match. But character, I mean, novels upon novels are written about human character, right? And you can never pin it down, and you can never get it right. And I do think there's an element of de-risk in terms of the character match against what a suitable franchise is for a given person. Emphasis on that person and that personality. But we at BFS, we do try to find the right buyers. We don't do massive amounts of psychometric testing and getting into character, but it is an area we do want to explore more. Like I say, we've only just started on our journey, it feels like. And interestingly, that might be something AI can be brought to bear to help elicit the character of and suitability of an individual that goes above and beyond the capital requirements and the financials. So I think it's a very valid, great point by Joe. I think it's the kind of fuzzy kind of X factor in terms of how a match might work. And I guess the savvy franchisor has to factor that into the suitability and expectation that ultimately a franchisee is going to be successful, because ultimately that's what you want. You want franchisees to be successful because they're suitable and they're right. And what I think is interesting about the character point is the longevity and the time value of commitment that needs to be given to the life of franchise. This is not a one-off purchase. This is a process. It's not an event, to quote the cliche on this. And it's the process of the ongoing development of that franchisee within a given unit. And that you need to ask questions about the character to know whether the suitability of that franchise is right in year 1, year 2, year 3. And we do debate that internally. Well, how can we do that programmatically as a marketplace to really elicit? And we've got a few irons in fire that are going to be coming to market that hopefully will start addressing that and find more suitability and applicability, that we have the right people, the right buyers coming through. It's incredibly hard to measure.
It is. It is, and I think you're absolutely right. I mean, I have to give a shout out actually to our friends at Human Op, because that's exactly what they're trying to do. Right. They're trying to measure what people are in terms of their character, and I think it is really hard. Nick Pleven of eTalent, he tries to do that with candidates as well. But it's incredibly character, just as Joe's rightly put there, and just as you've just said, Andrew, it's hard to measure. Some of the other things are much easier.
It's nebulous. It's nebulous is the only word I can come through. It goes right to heart of being human.
Yes. Yes.
And aligning your character with a prospect, your ambition, your motivation. What's going to get you up in the morning to drive, because eventually and inevitably businesses are tough.
Yeah,
they just, it does bring out the character in you, and I say that as someone who's run a business for 30 plus years, and alongside great characters, I might add, like Salim, of what it takes to persevere and overcome and surmount, and all the things that not just wrinkles and road bumps, sometimes absolute monolithic brick walls that get put in your way.
Absolutely.
Now, how do you scale them?
Yeah. It's a very good point. Even if you can define the character of somebody, and that aligns with your values, aligns with your culture, it's very hard to then scale that. You're right. I mean, we're not here necessarily to answer these questions.
No.
We're here to pose these questions so that people can think about it, but I love it. But we are starting to come towards the end of this section of the show. Let's bring up one more. Let's see what Simon's got to say here. Interesting discussion around what today's entrepreneurs look like. Social media, influencers, celebrity culture, they appear to be more closely aligned to franchising compared with the traditional view of what an entrepreneur is, and their misfit for it, for franchising. I think this is a really interesting one. It goes back to that sort of age of buyers that are potentially coming in for franchise brands. Do you think that we're getting younger entrepreneurs for this reason?
I think social media, look, social media is affecting every aspect of life, and entrepreneurship will not be any different. So, we can go on about the impact it has on democracy itself and how people are influenced to think in a certain way. I think you do have entrepreneur influencers as to what it takes to generate wealth in this world, which is a prime motivation, certainly for young people. They want money in their pocket. They want to have means. They want to be able to do things. And there is the rise of the buyer of a business with no money down, right? Let's call it that. Which for a lot of people who are longer in the tooth in this game think, well, it's just some nonsense. You can't buy something for nothing. Why would a seller even sell something for nothing in the first place, for crying out loud? And how does the loaning and the financing work when you're not putting any money down, in the first instance, etc.? And why do you think someone's going to allow you to have an earn out with no money down, and why is the seller going to sell with no money out in the first instance, etc., etc.? So that has been a very interesting phenomenon and you've got a real schism of people that have knocked around the block long enough to know that it's an unrealistic aim versus because ultimately finance is a huge important part of the buying process, right? Having access, and that's why I think you get a mismatch of young people wanting to get into franchising but don't necessarily have the access to capital. Not too dissimilar from buying a house, right, and getting on the property ladder. And we do a lot as a society to look in the mirror to say, well, that's not quite right, and then trying to address the supply and demand, build 1.5 million homes, etc. There's something similar going on in the business buying world too, I think. And I would love to see more effort and energy to help and support. And I think you're absolutely right to pick this up, Harvey, in terms of entrepreneurship should start young, and we as a society should support our young entrepreneurs or people who want ownership and want to do right in the world and provide a service, a value-driven service that's going to give service to the universe, etc. Not wanting to sound too highfalutin about it, but yeah, I agree with all of that. I do think it will make for a better society.
I think so too. I think we've as franchisors, we've got to support. There's obviously an interest with young people for franchising, but we've got to address some of those challenges. But I also agree you've got to have some skin in the game. But if a young person has been saving their money and they've got 2,000 or 3,000 to invest, and that's a lot of money to them, right? Then that's perhaps where some franchisors can come in and maybe help out. But look, it's going to have to be a chat for another day, because we have now come to the end of the first section of today's show. And of course, this is now the bit where my camera will go off, and this isn't because things are broken. This is because it's now technically illegal to see me without a hat on. Now I have another hat on, and of course this hat is brought to you by Murphy and Sons bespoke British hatters, and it's the lovely Paul Murphy, who's also works for a franchise brand, and he's made this lovely hat. So this is also the part of the show where we stop talking about franchising and what buyers are and all that sort of thing, and it's when we get under the hat of the guest. Now, it was Andrew's turn last time. We found out some very interesting stuff about Andrew. He's going to be a composer in the future, I'm sure of it. But it's Salim's turn today. But Salim, you are going to get your chance to get your own back on me and ask me a question afterwards. But let's go for this. I would like maybe a claim to fame or somebody famous you've met. Tell us.
I have bumped into a lot of famous people. Okay, well, claim to fame. I was once tripped over by. No, actually, no. He's second. I've got two then. I'll give you two. I was once tripped over when face planted in boots on Regent Street by Graham Norton. So I just happened to be wandering one way, and my uni was across the road, and he happened to go the other way. He was very nice and very kind, and he didn't lift me up or anything like that. He just carried on walking. I think he was busy. And then the other one is I got clipped by Boris Johnson on his bike outside Barbican Station. So I mean, none of these are happy experiences, but I'll put them out there.
I love it. I love it. I like the fact that you were tripped over by Graham Norton. It would be even more amusing if you said that he reacted really angrily, but of course he was a lovely chap about it.
Yeah, he's a nice guy. He's a nice guy.
Oh, fantastic.
Boris, on the other hand, didn't even look.
I didn't realise you've been hit by Boris. I've been hit by Boris too. I think most people who work in and around Barbican in the early 2010s when he was mayor, you'd absolutely belt it down Goswell Road, not giving a care in the world of anybody, and just take everybody out. I think that's his style.
I love it. I think hit by Boris Johnson. Now that's going to make the news.
Yeah, I hope not.
Fantastic. Well, look, that's brilliant. Well, look, I did say you can get your own back on me if you wish. You don't have to, but you can now, if you wish, ask me any question you like.
Do you know what? I'll just reverse the same question back at you, because that'll be quite interesting to learn.
Okay, so what my claim to fame? Okay, in the early 1990s, I used to work as a freelancer, a waiter and chef, and that sort of thing. And I used to work at this local castle, and they held various different events there, including Mastermind. And I got to know the guy who did the scores on Mastermind. I served him his dinner, I got chatting to him, and all it was is somebody clicking a mouse to change the score. And I said, please, can I just click the mouse once? And he let me do it. So I changed the score on Mastermind once. That's my claim to fame.
I love it. I love it. You mastered the mastermind. I do like what Simon just said there. We've all been hit by Boris.
Oh, fantastic. Well, look, we have now come to the end. I'm going to let you know what's going to go on next week. Next week is going to be a little bit of a surprise one. And I may possibly next week have a multi-unit, multi-site US franchisee with over 100 sites to talk about that very subject. So it could be a very interesting one if he can make it. If not, we'll do something else. And I do have to go now because I'm actually meeting a franchisee, and that franchisee was, of course, supplied by our lovely friends at Businesses for Sale. So thank you, gentlemen. I'm looking forward to this, although you're making me work very late in the evening.
Sorry, Arvi.
It's our pleasure.
Fantastic. Well, look, I'd like to first of all thank everyone who's been with us live today, everyone who watches this in the future. And I'd of course like to thank Salim and Andrew for their time. It's been an absolute pleasure as always, gentlemen. So thank you very much. And we will see you again next week. So until next time.